Lincoln was quick to get a head start on his nightly preparations before bed. Jumping in the shower, however, he spent the maximum of 3 minutes scrubbing down and 30 seconds drying himself out. When he spent another 30 seconds cleaning any leftover food from his choppers, the loud boy didn't even bother trying to put change in his PJs while in the Oval Office. Seeing that he wasted enough time not being established a safe zone, if a point were to be made, he nearly slammed into bewildered Lori, while having nothing but his towel on his right. She reached to the top step. Once he shut his bedroom door, the loud gave a sigh of relief before putting his pajama pants on. "Well, I managed to get through dinner." Lincoln rubbed his stomach. "I don't feel sick or anything, and Lynn actually listened to me and didn't try anything funny." The boy grabbed his nightshirt and started to put it on. "Although I was surprised that no one still wanted to talk to me at all. I mean, it wasn't like I had seen them starting. I thought Lynn could have at least said..." He stuck out his tongue, pulled out the shirt over his head. "Something because she didn't have a problem with that earlier." Lincoln then dug into his backpack and pulled out a container of floss. Snapping a line a few inches long, he started grinding it down between the cracks of his teeth. "So I guess eating with everyone else at dinner doesn't bother me." He frowned a little, knowing it was a lie. "Not well enough that I want to be there at all, but at least Mom and Dad were around." Lincoln then pulled the floss out, running his finger down to remove whatever food that caught in his mouth before going back to work. "What am I supposed to do about school now? I know I can just get up early to avoid standing in line, but being in the van with Lori drives us to school?" He shook his head. "I don't think I'm ready for that." His tongue lapped around the empty holes where a few of his teeth used to be. Lincoln could feel the tips of his permanent teeth poking out, but it made him grimace as it did serve a stark reminder of how many times he had been hit in the face. Those girls really packed a punch. If not, that was just what Lynn did this. A knock on his door made the boy pause, his chest feeling heavy as he wiped his head to the door. Was it one of his siblings? Did they want anything from him? They almost never knocked before, just knocked on the door. "Lincoln?" Rita called out, as she peered from behind the wooden frame. "Oh, right, Mom wanted to talk," Lincoln told himself, as he dispelled a sigh through the nose. Rita smiled a little. "Glad to see you remember to floss," she kindly told him. Opened the door enough to let herself in before closing it. Lincoln pulled the floss out of his mouth, giving his mother a nervous smile. "I still remember what you told me after the doctor visit." Rita sat on the bed, patting a spot next to her and Lincoln to sit. Boy did without a question, dumping the used floss into the trash before taking a seat. "So how do you feel?" the Maharaj asked. "A little refreshed after being in the shower." Lincoln ran his hand through his arm, noting how rough his skin felt, although it might have been dried myself a little too hard. Rita chortled a little. "Not just that, sweetie. I mean not being here at home." "Oh," Lincoln frowned. Guess he didn't respond right away, but when Rita didn't expect him to. A situation like this was complicated, and she was a very patient woman to let him formulate his response. "It's weird, I guess. I'm kinda glad to be back in my room." Lincoln looked around, even though it was a lot smaller than the McBride's guest room. But at the same time, he folded his arms, gripping the sleeves of his shirt. "I'm scared, Mom. I came back because I wanted to try and be brave. I found out Lynn, Lucy, Luann, twins, and my friends were working together to try and keep me calm during school. It was an accident, though. I was going to give Clyde his phone, but when he had a text from Lynn on it, I went through the messages and saw they were worried I no longer trust anybody if I keep being afraid of them all the time." Rita raised a brow. She hadn't known about the operation of her daughters were doing, but it must have worked out, since they hadn't brought home any bad news. "Do you have trust issues with them now?" Lincoln was about to respond, but she quickly added, "With your friends, I mean?" Lincoln shook his head. "No, I can understand why they did it. They risked their friendship just to help me, and that's something you see a lot of heroes doing, even though it may not always work." The boy unfolded his arms as he sat up on his lap. They were all very brave to do it, and the whole time, I was worried about what my mothers would do to me. I also saw that everyone was starting to get worn out from me being scared all the time, and even Ronnie Ann said that in the text that she wanted to be my old self again. She looked at the cower towards the door, and he heard a bit of the noise that came from beyond the wooden frame. Most likely the girls were getting themselves ready for bed. I wanted to be brave like my friends, and I know I can't always have them helping me with everything. That's why I wanted to come home. I wanted to try and meet my problems head on like a savvy would. Lincoln looked at his mother. I even came down because I wanted to see if I could at least try to be around all my sisters without running away. It was, he glanced to the side, pretty difficult not to do, though I thought someone might poison my food or something. Rita blinked in surprise at this. But didn't that make much sense when I thought about it? The boy knitted his brows. And my sisters aren't really the best planners of that stupid protocol is any clue. Wait a minute, Lincoln, Rita interrupted right now. Why would you think the girls try to poison you? Lincoln pierced his lips. It was just a thought in my head. Yes, I get that, but why? The monarch pressed a little, trying a little more forceful than she intended. Lincoln pierced his lips as he tried to calm up, but even though he shifted through and stared towards the carpet, she saw his eyes beginning to water as his mouth quivered a little. Maternal instincts coming forth, Rita put a comforting hand around her son, pulled him towards her. Lincoln sniffled, rubbing his nose, and leaned into his mother's side. Rita debated on what her next move. She would have stopped as to try not to make her son cry, but after learning about various personality issues her daughters were dealing with, and seeing how Lincoln seemed hesitant to discuss his daydream, she wanted to help her son in any way she could. Rita knew that she'd have to make do the painful process of edging it out to him. That much she learned from Dr. Lopez. Honey, is there something about your sisters that you aren't saying? The monarch asked in a soothing tone. Lincoln gave a light nod. You know those dreams I have about my sisters? Rita was about to respond, but Lincoln wasn't finished. All those nightmares I have had about them, he breathed in through his nose, which sounded very nasally as tears leaked from his eyes. Most of them were about them killing me. Rita's mouth dropped as her eyes widened. It's been like that since I was in the hospital. I was hurting so much, I thought they were trying to kill me for a long time since then. Lincoln blinked as a fresh tears painted his face. And almost every time I fell asleep, it just got worse and worse. The memories of previous nightmares were flooding all with the tidal wave, becoming too much for Lincoln to bear as he shuddered instinctively. From the first one, the first night at the hospital, all up to his first day's savvy dream, they sped through his mind within seconds from each other. His brain, however, throbbed due to the stress, becoming too much to bear. After Lincoln brought up his hand to fresh tears poured from his eyes as he gritted his teeth. The boy bit a few of his fingers as quiet sobs escaped from him. Breathing in after a moment of a whimper resonated from his mouth. For Rita, she felt as if she was reliving the moment of her boy was unconscious after all the pain that had been dealt with him. And honestly, she couldn't blame Lincoln for having such extreme nightmares. There was a very real possibility that he could have died from his injuries, aside from him passing out from a serious concern. The surgery he went through involving correcting the alignment of one of his ribs, since it was just a few centimeters from piercing his left lung. And with all the new information in mind, everything else suddenly made sense. The girls had been acting so moody, not only cause they assaulted their brother in a way that wouldn't ever be conceived, but they possibly were aware that they nearly ended his life over. That was essentially an exercise in stupidity. It was fortunate the girls managed to come to their senses before Lincoln received any threatening injuries. But if they hadn't... No, Rita, don't you dare go there, the monarch chided to herself. There was already one crying person in the room. There didn't have to be two. As much as she wanted to right now, staying strong for her son was the most important, even if she knew herself and Lynn had a tad of this issue indirectly. Lincoln, the woman started, her son stopping his sniffles as he rubbed his nose again, wiping any excess mucus off his pants. I can't begin to tell you how much sorry I am for all the nightmares you've been going through. Your sisters may have been the ones causing them. Rita caused a solemn glance at the floor. But your father and I are here as much as to blame. We didn't do enough to keep everyone from fighting. All we did was hide as idiots, hoped it would solve itself. Lincoln didn't say anything, as he didn't even know whatever he should. His mother spoke the truth, and when he did feel occasionally, his parents would turn a blind eye to whatever the kids did, and if it became too much to handle. But hearing his mother actually admitted to adults in the house being cowards was still surprising in its own right. It probably wasn't meaning much at this point, and your father will likely tell you the same thing. But I'm sorry I haven't been the best mother I could do for any of my kids. Hearing him sniffle again, Rita stood up halfway, reached towards the dresser. She grabbed the tissue box and pulled a few slips from it, holding out the two to her son's nose seconds later. Lincoln didn't need to be told twice as he emptied the nasal passages into them. You wouldn't be going through this turmoil if me or Lynn stepped in and things got rough. But we failed to realize how disastrous the situation was until it was too late. Rita blinked back some tears before continuing. We were trying so hard to fix this, but it hasn't, been easy. While the girls and yourself had plenty of issues to deal with, it still falls upon the parents to fix it. And we could have done a pretty poor job on it until, Lincoln winced a little, taking a fur tissue from his mom before blowing into it. But things are going to be different from now on, I promise. Rita lightly rubbed her son's shoulder. If you need anything, you could come straight to me or your father, and we'll handle it. I know you may be wondering what you'll do tomorrow about getting to school. She looked down at him. If you're not comfortable with being in Vansville with the others, right? The middle child shook his head. So you're free to walk to school or use your bike to get there. Just remember to let me or your father know about it first. Lincoln gave a nod. Rita reassured her son, getting off the bed so she could kneel in front of him. We love you so very much, Lincoln, and we're not going to let anything hurt you again. I know you still don't trust your sisters, but they aren't going to hurt you. She placed a hand on his shoulder. They just want to make amends, but it's up to you if you let them. Now, are you still having those bad nightmares? No, Lincoln spoke in a hoarse tone, pausing to clear his throat out. They stopped a little while after I stayed the night at Clyde's. Now these days I'm getting dreams about being ace-savvy, now of me being leader of the girls in the group. He balled his tissues with one hand. Although they betrayed me at some point, the boy sighed. It's hard to explain, but I'm not getting any dreams about me being killed anymore. That said, had nothing to deal with the near-death experiences he went through in his dreams, but his statement remained true. Well, Rita smiled, it's a start, although if you start having nightmares, our door's open. She kissed the boy on the forehead before embracing him. Having a good night, sweetie. Lincoln returned the gesture, feeling the warmth of his chest. Good night, Mom. After she released him, Rita ruffled his white flossels as little as she stood up. Earning a chuckle from the boy, she quietly exited out of the room a moment later, making sure to shut the door behind her. Silence was all that remained around the girls were now in their respective rooms. But Lincoln didn't mind. For the second time that day, he felt pretty content with himself. A personal record given how his early days usually went off as late. He kept the real problem with all of his dreams a secret for so long, he almost forgot he never information his parents about it. Rita didn't even explode and worry like he originally predicted. She comforted him in a way, as a caring mother would, and gave him reassurance that she and his dad would protect him. Naturally, she dropped the advice on how to deal with his sisters, but she still left the ultimate up to him. I know you still don't trust your sisters, but they aren't going to hurt you. They want to make amends, but it's up to you if you'll let them. Those words repeated themselves in Lincoln's head as he climbed onto the bed. The subject of forgiveness wasn't as easy to reach as all things considered. Even if Lincoln did forgive him for beating the crap out of him, it still didn't excuse the fact that he feared for his own life for the past 2 months. None of his siblings could compare any movement from the amount of hell he went through living in that constant eye-shoulder and barely getting any sleep, because he'd soon be waking up in terror. But in spite of worrying too much of death, Lincoln didn't have any clue that would hint up his sisters trying to take his life. Just the opposite, really. And he had been in some process that they had made it secret. However, Lincoln knew that his sisters had a bad habit of either uncaring or just plain forgetful of bits of info that would have stopped their conflicts he had seen before being forced to take part in. Lack of common sense might have been a curse in the house, or some inherited trait. He didn't know. Maybe I could forgive him at some point. Lincoln reached forward and switched the light off. But I don't see myself doing that any time soon. Either way, Lincoln was pleased to get a dreamless night rest that night, right after propping his door shut with his chair. Better safe than sorry.